Ladies and gents, welcome back to Engineers, the podcast. Today we've got Robert with us, who's Director of Engineering at a company called Algolia. If you are devs listening, some of you guys and girls might have used this platform before. Essentially, they're a search and discovery platform that offers APIs for devs to integrate with around improving search and recommendations on their platforms. So, Robert, thanks for joining us. How are you? How's things?
Hey Elliot. Good. I'm good. Really excited to be here. How about you?
Love it. Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm always excited. Do you want to give us a quick intro into you and help the audience familiarize themselves around who you are?
Sure thing. So I'm Robert. I'm Director of Engineering here with Algolia. And I've been working here for more than 4 years now.
Cool.
I start initially working on what we called at the time the developer experience products, things like API clients, front-end libraries, and whatnot. And then more recently, I've been starting a different effort about building our data ingestion platform.
Nice. And predating Algolia, tell us a little bit about your background or career history, if you like. We're going to touch on that slightly anyway, as we know, as we've got some bits to talk about in regards to Amazon. I'm giving everyone a clue, but it'd be good to understand a little bit about you before Algolia as well.
Sure. So I started my career as a mobile engineer, more specifically iOS. So I started back when I think iOS 2 was on the market. So there were not many iOS engineers, which meant a lot of cool stuff to do. I started working in an agency building application for, I think now I can say it's been like 10 more years. One of the first Nespresso applications where you can actually, you had George Clooney ordering coffees, Best Western hotel booking applications and, booking cards, like everything, like everybody wanted an app. And basically, after that, I was like a super fanboy of Apple, and I had the opportunity to join Apple after 3 years or so of doing mobile. I did that in Paris, so Apple, they do have an office in Paris, and I was working on for 2 years basically on building internal software. From like package tracking solutions to fleet management and whatnot. It was a great experience. It was like a very fulfilling experience, working in a company like that.
Yeah.
But then always my dream was, I was a developer at heart, right? And I was seeing the movies and stuff about Silicon Valley. And I was like, oh my God, I want to go to US. And then I kind of started interviewing and Amazon came along and I was like, okay. I didn't know much about them besides the fact that they were selling things. And then I was like, okay, cool. Let's do it. It's like, yeah, we're based in Seattle. And I was a bit ignorant at the time, right? I was like, where is Seattle on a on a map? It's like, okay, so
way up there.
Yeah. But then, I went there, I interviewed there, and I got hired. So I started working on, I spent 2 years and a bit on at Amazon, worked on the Kindle Fire, the tablet, most specifically on the browser, on different products, and then moved into the Prime Now application that we're going to talk a bit later. And then, I kind of navigate a bit towards, like, I started my own company, start teaching.
Yeah.
And 4 years and a bit, I joined Algolia.
Love it. And you mention it at some point, a little bit later on in the pod, we're going to talk a little bit about Amazon Prime. I'm really keen at that point to tuck into some of the Amazon mindset around building software. So we will, and I'll ask some of those deliberate questions around that. Help us understand as an audience, who are Algolia? I've obviously given the intro, but who are Algolia and what do they do?
Yeah. So Algolia, like you said, right, we are a API first search and discovery platform, which means we're helping the builders out there, compose great experiences and actually take advantage of their content, right? Search and discovery, it's all about content, like your catalog, your data, and like how do you make that something truly magical for the end consumers? So we do that through we started historically with with search, right? That was the first problem that we solved. And then we moved into, okay, recommend. So not just kind of like the first pages and like helping you get to the result, but even giving you more clarity on, okay, this result doesn't live in isolation, but there are like other products that are related in different ways. And again, we do that with a lot of focus on you as a builder. How do you think about your product? What are you trying to achieve, and how do we help you achieve that? And then we can dive a bit deeper into what does it mean for developers specifically. But there's not just that, right? It's all about as well as like, okay, as a business, what do you need? Like an e-commerce versus a media versus a SaaS. Like, what are your different needs compared to one another? Because you don't have one tool fits them all. But so that's why sometimes we go into verticals and sometimes we go like horizontal solutions. And at the end of the day, a big focus on everything that we do is the end customer, right? Because you could have great software, you can have great business tools, but if your end customer doesn't feel the love, right, then you're doing it for nothing. And that's why companies like Amazon, Netflix, Facebook are winning in the market, because they have these great experiences and they pay a lot of attention to what is great for their customers. And the challenge in today's world is, how do you compete with companies like that when you are like 20 engineers company, 50 engineers company, 100? So that's where we're trying to help.
A really interesting question that springs to mind is, how are you different or catering for being developer first versus B2C? Because equally, I can understand that it's probably the same goal, but it probably applies two different mindsets in there as well. So can you help us understand that?
And so, to be honest, it took me a while to get here, to understand this, because the problem is when you're a developer first and where you in the B2B compared to B2C is everything you do, it's visible, right? So let's talk about Amazon or any other website that you like. You go on Amazon.com and you do your search, and if it works well as an end customer, you're happy, right? And that's kind of, you need to know your audience. So your audience is the consumer. The consumer doesn't really care what's behind of Amazon. Like if you patched everything and it's just like about to explode, or if it's super performant. What they're interested in is, okay, does it work? Does it help me, do whatever I'm expecting from this website and whatnot? Now, in the B2B, and most specifically when you have developer in front of you, they're going to judge you, right? They're going to judge your product and they're going to compare to other solutions, especially in markets where you have like open source and SaaS and whatnot. So first of all is, do you understand the developer community? Do you understand what they're trying to do and how do they do it? Do you understand the tech stack that they are using and the domain in which they are evolving? A lot of Algolia's products are open source, which means you cannot just put lipstick on a pig. I guess that's the expression, right? Everything we do is visible. So any developer can see, if we're actually slacking, if we're actually not paying attention to things like reliability, maintainability, and if we're just trying to sell you a fake dream. So, things like, because I'm spending my days right now interviewing, so I talk to hundreds of candidates. And sometimes I'm still surprised when I hear like, testing, it's something that is nice to have. So we have things like, like testing, CI/CD, design reviews. All those things for us are the baseline, right? Are like normal things that we need to do to make sure that at the end of the day, everything that we ship it's stable, and it's performant. Because the biggest difference in a way between B2C and B2B is everything that we ship it in other people's software. So there are like thousands of companies which are embedding our software, which means if we ship, let's say, something that is going to crash, it's going to not crash only on your website or your service, and then you have a patch in 5 minutes and it's ready, but it's going to explode in like tens of thousands of other people's services, which means you are as well reliable. Like you need to be reliable for them as well, right? And accountable for your work. So we own, the delivery from 0 to 100. again, we are developers, so we know exactly what we need to pay attention to
Yeah.
in order to actually have something that that works.
That's why I love the idea of the platform. And from what I understand, listening as well, think like an engineer, but think like a customer as well. It's almost like a stepping stone part of we interact directly with engineers. They know us, they know our bread and butter and our day to day. Think like an engineer, think like a customer. Because essentially you're B2B to C in effect.
Yeah, and I guess you even see that on how we build roadmaps, right? I think this is another debate in the community. Is like, okay, the product is defining the roadmap, and you as the developer, you're just executing. When you are in this space, it's exactly the opposite, right? Like, you are a developer, so you know your audience really well. So you are a part of the product. The product is, your work. So
Yeah.
the way we work is, it's a true collaboration, right, between product and the engineers in the team, and we're defining together, like, what are we building next? And
Yeah.
a lot of our great products, things like API clients and instant search libraries, front end libraries, a big chunk of that work was actually built by developers without even product being
Okay.
involved. And I'm not saying, okay, we should not have products. I think that would be the wrong part of my message. But it's super important to have the developers, the engineers of your team being involved in that. And if you don't do
Yeah.
that, probably you're not going to have a product that worth using as a developer, right? Because again, we see developers being the champions of Algolia. So they start with using Algolia on very small projects, and then they are the one pushing it in their companies because it fits, and they their needs, and it works seamlessly. And we actually tried, like it's not that we tried, we do for several years building like different solutions for the developer community for Christmas, and
Yeah.
one of the great product that came out of it was Doc Search. So
Okay.
not many know about
Nice.
it, but actually do many know about it. So every time you go on a website like Tailwind or React or Bootstrap, and you go
I'm
on
going on there.
documentation, you're going to see Algolia being the search provider. So
Okay.
this is a service that we offer for free to all the companies out there that they have open source documentation and open source projects, right? So a lot of these developers,
Cool.
they see us, and they understand we are a part of the community, and we're not trying here to just sell you a product like any other product, but we do truly understand what it is to be building a tool for as a developer.
Yeah. Picking up on some of the things you said a handful of minutes ago that I thought were really interesting, the lipstick on a pig analogy, which I love. This pretty element, and you're talking to a lot of people at the moment who don't have that emphasis on maybe reliability engineering or test-driven development or building pipelines. Talk to us about those two trade-offs, if you can, as in being pretty versus, if you like, performance engineering, because they're two things that I can imagine. Tell me if I'm wrong as well. I can imagine they're probably quite a big trade-off within the business.
Yeah. So there is, oh yes, indeed. So it's always one of the questions that we always ask ourselves is, what are you trying to optimize for? First,
Okay.
why are you doing this? So we always try to start with the why. Like, what is the whole reason that we're going to build this or we're going to do that? And then what are you trying to optimize for? And in the beginning, it was not necessarily always clear. So I told you one of the projects that I was working on when I joined, given my background, was front-end libraries for mobile, and more specifically for native platforms, iOS and Android.
Yep.
And Instant Search was, and it is, a framework that allows you to build this search UI experiences in no time, right? And the motivation was, we saw all these companies trying to build the same search experience. You need the search bar and you need filters and whatnot, and always reinventing, and sometimes not even getting it correctly, because they were trying to just use the API client. So I was like, what if we can offer them something to solve 80% of their use case, while they can still focus on the 20%, which is customizable? And the decision that we took in the beginning was, okay, we're going to offer UI components, so search bars and filters and whatnot, that they can just plug and play.
Cool.
And what we're thinking is we're going to optimize for speed, right? So that when I see speed of development, they're going to just plug this and then it's going to work. What we realized very fast, it took us it took us a couple of iterations, but was on native platforms, it was very, very hard to customize things.
Okay.
So a search bar in itself, it's a UI search bar, was a component that back then you could have changed the background color, a bit of text, and that's kind of it. And when you look at the companies out there, they all want their own brand, right? So they want to make things that are bold and make a statement, and you actually identify easily this is X versus Y because it looks like this. And even though we were helping a majority of our developers build the first experience fast, and there was the wow effect, right? Like you plug things and they worked and you have the data displayed and it's great. Once that they went into like more customizable, right? Like into a big, like more mature level of the product that we're trying to build, they were getting blocked a bit because, okay, well, now I need to rewrite a bunch of things because your search bar cannot be customizable, which was not our search bar. It was like the native component that we
got you.
So then what we realized is, okay, it's great for people to build fast, but if they build fast up to a point where then they are blocked and they have to revisit their entire choice based on our choices, they might lose trust, they might lose time, they're gonna definitely not gonna help them. So the second version, the second iteration was, okay, what are we actually trying to solve? And we start thinking about the actual problems, and we're thinking about like the feedback that we're getting. And what we realized, it was not, okay, they need a search bar, but is they need a way to keep the state of everything that goes behind the search experience. Like every time you type something and you apply a filter and you select something and you go on a page, though, like that state was hard to maintain. And that's where a lot of people were having problems, not customizing a search bar. So the second step was, okay, we're going to introduce this concept of middleware or, connectors, which they handle the entire state. And then, the search bars and whatnot, the UI, it's something that we are going to still work on, but that's optional. And you can use any input that could, be any components that can give you an input. So for example, a search bar, but a text edit or whatnot. And then basically we unblocked everybody, right? Because we need to give, as a developer and as a developer builder, you need to think about what is the escape hatch, right? If it's good to have strong opinions, but not block your customers because your opinions are like that.
I think for what I decipher from that, understanding some of the business logic and the problem you said that people are trying to solve is really key. And the reusability and the customization, especially on the front end. We're going to talk about the infrastructure part as well, that I know your mindset is really similar to that. That seems quite key for Algolia's success. I like that.
Indeed. Again, for me, and so there's another aspect to it as well, is how do you listen to your customers, right? And I think it's not just when you build a B2B or a developer first experience, but it's even harder when you build tools like this, because if you have your own website, you can like push a lot of analytics and insights and whatnot, and then we can discuss about GDPR and. But you can have a lot of implicit feedback about how people are using your product. However, when you build tools for developers and when you build solutions like this, you cannot have as much implicit feedback, right? Because, like I said, everything we do is open source. So if tomorrow I'm adding Google Analytics to my libraries, nobody's going to like it. So you need to rely a lot on the community and talk with the community, and that's why a lot of things are open source, so we can actually get like GitHub issues and GitHub discussions with the community, and always have the documentation is another important aspect of developer first tool, because product, because that's how your developers are going to learn how to use your product, right? There's going to be their place where they're going to find the answers, and that's a good opportunity place as well to give them a chance of sharing their frustrations with you and help you overall build a better product. So always think about, how can I make how can I open the discussion with the community, right? Like always try to be active. If someone is complaining about the product, that's a great opportunity for you to improve it. It's not something that you should run away from.
Yeah, I think when I started this pod, and it even becomes more apparent in this conversation, I thought some of the challenges or the most difficult challenges were around the technicals, as in scale or reliability. But I think the more and more people and companies that I speak to, especially in this instance, customer understanding and context has been really key to understanding how you delight customers or delight developers, if you like, as opposed to how do we move from millions of events running through our platform to trillions of events running through our platform. Sure, that's probably a problem to solve, which I'm sure we're going to talk about the infrastructure parts in a second, but really it's the customer understanding part that I think derives more of the challenges itself. It's interesting hearing some of the bottlenecks as you talk about the search bars and what people were looking for, or what you thought people wanted and what people are actually looking for.
Yeah. And that's the other part as well, right? When you start working in a company like Algolia, is I didn't really understand. I didn't really understood what search is until I actually start working on it. And once that you start working on it, you realize like how bad it is on most of the other places. And it's all
Is that
about
your sales pitch? That's your sales pitch to everyone else.
It's actually sad, it's not my sales pitch. It's something that once again, it's an actual problem because you get frustrated. Now you are an expert in the field and you know what search should be like, and you go on a website and you're trying to kind of find what you're looking for. Like, come on, man! Like typo tolerance is a 2010 thing. It should be already here. But the magic thing about search is not most of people think about search as a search bar, right? Mm-hmm. And that's not how actual customers use it. So search bar is just one way of interacting with the content. One thing that we realize is when you go on a first page of a website, pure e-commerce go-to for buying your jeans or whatever, that's already a search place. It's a discovery place, right? So the first panels that you see about recommendations or, from a specific brand or because you bought this, that's already search as well. Like help you, discover already more content. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're trying to shortcut the experience and the frustration of, I have something in mind and I need to find it. And it shouldn't be like a marathon of like, how do I get there? It should be as intuitive as, what are you looking for? Saying like red jeans, for example, you already know, okay, jeans is an actual category and red is a color. So we can give you actually a lot of better results instead of just having something like I don't know, reddish, I think my example here, I lost myself in the example. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is there are different ways of actually put the content in motion, right? Yeah. And that's something that we use internally. Is like, how do we put the content in motion, and how do we help our customers interact with that content? And again, it's all about the entire step, right? I go on the website, and that's where is my point of entry. And you should actually take advantage of that because you know your customer, you know your audience. So why should you show me something super generic as in women's skirts when in reality I'm a man, which you already know I bought t-shirts, right? Or vice versa. So, and then once that you go into the search, how do you make it intuitive? If I start searching for pirate, if it's around Halloween, probably show me some Halloween costumes. So taking account seasonability, time of the year or time of the day. If I'm a restaurant or like a Yelp, right? Like if I look for pizza, don't show me like a bar and a diet, like, right? Because again, so it's all about how do you make a product that works as well with what the end customer is expecting.
This might come across as a really dim question, but we're on recommendation engines anyway. As part of Algolia's features, do you help build recommendations for, let's just say, Gene's websites that is relevant to each individual customer? So when I log online, it's recognizing it as me. It is part of Algolia's sell, if you like, or feature, that it will know it's me and it will start recommending Genes to me based on my previous searches. That could be a really dim question, by the way, considering it's a recommendations engine. But is that part of what you do? You create a self-learning engine?
Yeah. So I don't think we're doing personalized recommendations just yet.
Fine.
So we're doing personalized search.
Okay.
Which means, so personalized search is basically, I know you're searching for jacket. So you search for jacket, and I know you are a man based on previous interactions or previous data that, the company sent. And then I'm probably going to show you like men jackets as first results, right?
Gotcha.
So then we are going to work. So I don't know exactly the roadmap on the recommend team, but that's personalized recommendation, which, yes, definitely is something which is under our scope. When is going to come? I don't know. Today, recommendation basically was like frequently bought together. So I bought a white t-shirt, probably show me some blue jeans or black jeans, but nothing, I don't know, green, because might not work. I mean, it might. Or, related products. So because I'm looking at this white t-shirt, is going to show me other white t-shirts that are somehow related, right? That's where we are today. That's what we offer. But I know the team has really ambitious goals, and in the coming months, we're going to see like really, really cool things.
Cool. If you need any user testing, you know where I am.
I'll do that, I promise.
Side question. No, go
on. So that's another thing that it's interesting and it's important, right? It's like, what are the assumptions that you make when you build a product, and what do you do in order to validate or invalidate, right? Like, we could have started with recommendation and start to build everything, right? Like personalized recommendations and frequently bought together, and like other people bought this and you should buy this, and like mix everything and ship a product 3 years after or 6 years after. And you realize that, okay, actually nobody needs recommendation, or you're too late in the game. Instead of that, our approach is like, how can we like ship small iterations, make some assumptions and do everything helping us to validate, invalidate, and then, pivot if needed. So that's why, when we build new things, it's not everything out of the box. In some cases, it's, recommended in the early stages.
Just as an idea, if you're fleshing out or trying to validate previous or recently bought with, as an example, how long do you think that could take from idea to going into production and being user tested?
So it depends.
Sorry, right? I've put you on the spot.
No, I know. But and I think it kind of introduced the second topic of the discussion in a way, right? Like, it depends. It depends how you build your company. It depends how you build engineering and product overall. It could take years, or it could take weeks.
Wow.
So I saw in my past experience, like products being shipped like this, right, in a matter of a month, 2 months, 3 months, and like products that generating like millions per month doing that.
Wow.
And I saw like very small features taking, like close to a year. The key question here you should ask yourself is like, what do you do, and how do you not only think about the product that gets out, but the underlying, software, the underlying infrastructure, the underlying processes that you're putting in place to help with each iteration, basically have small building blocks that you can then reuse later on, right? Like when you build the first API for, let's say, for recommend, right? How hard is going to be to actually spin a new API endpoint for frequently bought together with the collaborative filtering approach, right?
Yep.
And if every time you need to start from scratch, probably you're gonna get to 1 year of cycles. But if you actually every time you think a bit ahead. It's like, okay, this is something interesting that probably other people might use it. Then you might have a good chance of start building your actual foundation as a company, and helping others iterate fast, because every time you build a product, you're solving 100% of the problem. But if you actually start thinking about that problem, is like, okay, what if this 20% I can reuse it later, and then 40% here someone can become a library, and this one can become a service. Then you start building this culture of, okay, we're not doing this just to kind of meet an OKR at the end of the quarter, but we're doing this to invest in our future as a company, to be able to have faster iterations and faster release cycles and whatnot.
You're playing me a nice pass here. I agree with that. We've touched on that anyway. But you've played me a nice pass in terms of reusability. Should we touch on that?
Yeah,
and
I guess.
And
yes.
first touch on your experience at Amazon Prime, because that's significant. I think it lays quite a good foundation for how your offering's different from Amazon Prime, if you like, and what you learned there to Algolia. So talk to us about that experience, because I think that'll be really insightful and impactful for people listening as well, wanting to understand how people think at Amazon.
Right. So, I mean, it's no secret, right? Amazon is been innovating a lot across the entire engineering department. Now, one of the things that they're doing it, and they're doing it really, really well, is building, reusable software. Everything that you do, like, it serves a purpose, and it's built on top of something else. Like, you're never going to start deploying from scratch. And I mean, when I say never, there are cases, right? Like, Amazon is a huge engineering department, so there might be cases, but most of the time, 80% of the time, you're always going to reuse something else, from the underlying infrastructure to the underlying deployment service, and what you're using. But it was never as shocking as the example that I experienced on Prime Now, because Prime Now, for those who don't know, it's an app allowing you to order, a subset of the entire Amazon catalog, and deliver it under 1 hour, right? So very similar to, let's say, what Deliveroo is doing today with food and whatnot. It's Friday night, you need some beers and some chips because you're gonna watch your soccer game. Well, you order, and 1 hour then it's in front of your door. And then back in the day, it was like, wow, that's amazing. But so I don't know exactly from a business perspective, right? Like, how do we got to this and whatnot? But I know that the decision was Prime Now needs to go out before Christmas. I mean, just before Christmas. And basically, the engineering team had 3 to 4 months to build everything. Right? And we're talking about service here, which, again, you have a huge subcatalog of the entire Amazon, with order processing, and like the entire search and catalog management, and order tracking and payments, and like super complex, right? Like, it takes years to build everything like this. And now, it's like, okay, it's going to be before Christmas, and it needed to be before Christmas because, there's marketing in place, and you cannot push Christmas, right? You cannot say, well, let's push Christmas to be on 29 this year. And there's a lot of business implications there. I mean, of course, when you hear something like this, no, it's never going to happen from nothing to everything. But what was super surprising is everything was built on top of other systems. So we reused, I guess, it was Amazon Fresh. So Amazon Fresh was delivery for grocery delivery, right? Infrastructure. And then there was another system which we used for billing, which I don't remember, it was like Amazon Mom or something like that. And then we used the entire search infrastructure from Amazon Search. And one interesting thing there, right? Like, when you reuse a lot of components, in some cases you're going to get into situation where you're like, well, it doesn't really work with what we're trying to do. Right. And that's where they were very smart about it and very intentional. Is okay, if it doesn't work, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to rewrite it. But what you can actually do is do a concept which I don't know how they called it back in the day. At Algolia, we call it guest engineering. So
guest
engineering, right? So what it actually means is, so I had to implement some changes in the search experience on Prime Now. And the search results were not necessarily playing well with what we had in mind for Prime Now. So instead of rebuilding the entire search, I went into the search team for like several weeks. I worked with the folks in the search team. I built the feature there. They helped me, they mentored me, and they did everything. And then we deployed this feature in their entire, stack.
Yeah.
And now it was available not just for us, but as well for the entire Amazon retail app.
Gotcha.
Things related to how we collapse and expand results and whatnot. But then what happened there, and the magic of thing is, one, we solved our issue with a tenth of effort. Second is we built a feature now that can be reused by Amazon Retail, which is going to bring value to them as well. So we were like win-win, right? And then, the next team would come and would need a search experience. They would have already like 99% of the search built. So everything that we're doing, it was in this, in kind of like this, with this mentality. Even for the native applications, right? We're using underlining frameworks built in Amazon to deploy iOS and Android. Every time we saw something that was not working, we're not like, okay, I'm going to give up. I'm going to fix it. I'm going to ship it like upstream. And then the entire Amazon would benefit from it. So again, yes, it can start as small as, just documenting it and, like remove it from your app into like a separate lib or separate repo. I'm not saying, okay, start over engineering everything today, but start thinking about like, is this worth something more? Can I help other people with what I'm doing today?
I love that. The simple concept I imagined offline was Uber. I know nothing about Uber, by the way. No one's told me this at all, but I'm thinking about Uber and Uber Eats. You've got everything from mapping, GPS, you've got the infrastructure or driver infrastructure there. All you need to do is probably add on top of that features around supermarkets, other things. You could probably take billing, payments, checkout, etc., and just lift and shift it over to Uber Eats. That's how I imagined it. And probably, from what I understand, concepts are quite the same. Amazon Fresh, other things.
Yeah. So we are doing this now at scale at Algolia, right? It's been, I guess, about more than 6 months, more than that. So we introduced the concept of platforms.
Cool.
We didn't necessarily had this concept before, even though we were doing a lot in the reusability space. But now it's a thing, right? And that's when I was telling you in the beginning that my role today is working with the data ingestion platform. It's introducing the concept of platform when it comes to how do we think about data? How do we think about like ingesting the data and like reuse it? So to tell you a bit more about that, actually, should we go in that direction?
Let's do it. Yeah, take us.
Okay.
Take us. Here's the reins.
So to give you a short overview of how Algolia worked in the beginning. So, we had the search team, which was basically, they were building the search API. So basically, as a customer, you use the search API and you send your, records, and then they take those records, they index it, they own basically the end-to-end experience. Similar to, the recommend team, right? They have their own endpoint to kind of get the data and whatnot. And then, we have a bunch of other teams reusing events or records. And historically, they were all kind of owning everything on that side. It's like opening a new endpoint, building a pipeline of data and whatnot. So the direction that we took, for example, with ingestion is, okay, we're going to introduce the concept of a platform, which means our focus, we have a group of people, is how can we help all our internal customers leverage the data that the customers are sending it. So instead of them thinking, okay, how should I ingest data? They should think about how can I build value on top of this data. So the way we did this is a kind of like a 3-layer cake, I like to call it. So the first one is one team that we call events and records connections. And again, names are not necessarily important, but this team's entire focus, it's all about how can we unify the experience of sending data into Algolia, right? Like how can I push data as a customer, and how do Algolia can pull data from your, sources of data. For all the products, So as a customer, you should not think, I want to use recommend. What is the specific way of using sending that data? Or I want to use the search. How do I exactly send to that? It's like you think about, okay, how can I connect my sources of data? And this team as well is going to focus a lot on scaling the number of sources of data that we can support, right? Like historically, again, there's an API, you send data, and then we have a couple of connectors. Now, their focus is, okay, I want to help external customer, though, think about how do I send data, and then actually build the entire infrastructure to do that. Then they bring the data within Algolia. And we have the second step. So once that the data hits the Algolia infrastructure, we have the pipeline team, so the events and records pipeline, which the role of this team is to build everything necessary to process this data, like build these data orchestration layers into, okay, I want to clean the data, I want to enrich the data, I want to transform the data, version the data, and everything that you need to do in such a way that then downstream consumers, the search team, the recommend team, the query suggestion team, and whatnot, they can leverage it, right? And then, we would dump it, let's say, in a data warehouse or in a stream of data, and then they would reuse it. And then on top of this, we have something that we call the application experience, which that is all about building this Algolia experiences into native marketplaces like Shopify or Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And the goal of that is, how can we build these great experiences? Because we know fundamentally, we were talking before, that kind of personas are different than an average developer that is using APIs. So what it actually means being into a Shopify marketplace or an SFCC marketplace. But then, of course, they're at the top of the pyramid because they're going to reuse the entire connection and pipeline, system.
I'm with you. And I love the cake analogy as well.
Cheers. But yeah, so, one magical thing that happens when you start thinking about it is each team has a very clear focus, right? Like there's no debate. It's like, should we do this or not? It's like, okay, what's the main KPI of our team, right? Like what is our main mantra? It's like building data, importing data, like ingesting data. Okay, cool. So I'm going to work on that. Second thing is, now everything that you're going to build. So let's say you build a BigQuery connector, right? Like going and fetch data from BigQuery. It's not just one team, the search team that is going to leverage it or the recommend, but it's the entire company that actually leverages data because they don't care where the data is coming from as long as it comes, right? So we always have a multiplicator effect, right? Like one thing that you build now serves end product. The other main advantage is tomorrow there's a new team. You were talking about personalized recommendations. So actually, what's great about that, it's going to be close to zero effort. Of course, I'm minimizing. It's going to be effort onto building the feature itself. But what they're going to be able to do is plug into a stream of data that already comes. There are records coming, there are events coming. So your customer, the data. Now you're just mixing it together, and you focus on your business and your feature, right? Instead of spending months of, okay, now I need to deploy a new infrastructure. Should I do it on GCP or should I do it on AWS and whatnot? So again, that's our our focus today and our biggest challenge as well, right? Because we're in the early days of building everything like this. I know Facebook, Netflix, they figure it out. We are in the phase where we have a lot of assumptions. Where we take one by one and trying to validate them or not.
What do you think might come over the next couple of months? We're going to talk about where you're hiring, in a second. Just to wrap up, you've given us some massively valuable context around platforms, a little bit more on Algolia and some of the challenges. But what is to come, do you think, for the business?
So I guess right now, right now we're in the space of multi-product, right? So the challenge itself is like, how do we get there successfully? And we did it already with Recommend being the second product, and we're working on a third product and whatnot.
Nice.
But then from engineering perspective, product engineering perspective, it's all about like, how do we, so we know how to scale, right? Like today we have, trillions of search requests, more than, Bing and other search engines. We process like billions of data points per day. But it's like, so we know how to necessarily scale from an infrastructure perspective.
Yeah.
The goal here now is like, how do we actually move fast, right? Like, how do we build all these foundations and all these platforms and all these kind of like focus groups to be able to spin new idea, new products very fast, and minimize the effort into building things and then just trash them. So in the platform, in the data platform specifically, it's all about how can we get to a validation point as soon as we can, right? Like again, we are hiring a lot of people with expertise in the field to try to get there. That's why a lot of our assumptions are, one of the things that we're doing is we're using managed services. So instead of like spinning clusters of, let's say, Kafka, for now we would use things like, let's say, PubSub, right? Because our focus is not scaling the infrastructure. Our focus is like, do our customer need this kind of type of interactions? Our internal customers, can they benefit from what we're doing? How do we help them getting there? And then when we hit the sweet spot, that's when we actually start thinking about, okay, now we need to seriously build a new team that is going to help us maintaining the Kafka cluster, for example.
Customer versus engineering.
Right.
That's how I'm going to remember it.
Yeah.
Love it. Talk to us a little bit about hiring needs and where the business needs to scale internally.
Yeah. So today we're hiring every team is hiring, and like there's no shortage of job requirements. In my team specifically, I'm hiring front end, full stack, back end, DevOps engineers. I have like 15 plus openings. We are hiring remotely as well as on premises across US and a big chunk of Europe.
Okay.
So the biggest focus today is for us is, again, backend engineers, people who actually know how to do data at scale. They've been there, they've done that. We're in a phase where we consolidate our offerings, so we're hiring a lot of experts. Now there are tons of other teams, right? Recommend team, predict team, search team, and whatnot. Same thing. They're hiring data engineers, front-end engineers. So again, I think if you are an engineer and you're looking for a new job, go to the Algolia website, and there's a big chance you're going to actually find an opening that you like. Specifically that we're hiring as well all levels, right? From junior to principal engineers. So does it answer your question? Because it feels like...
It does. Yeah, it does. A question in there. Are you agnostic in terms of technology, or do you need to be more down the expert route of a language or a particular environment?
So I guess there are some jobs which require like expertise in a given with a given tech, but around 80% of our roles, we're not necessarily looking like, are you a Go expert or are you, a GCP expert? There might be a couple of those, but what we're looking for is like, have you kind of worked in this domain, right? Have you worked in this field, or do you actually want to work in this stuff and learn something new? So we're looking a lot on for people with desire to work on a given problem, with some experience about that, but not necessarily direct one-to-one mapping of skills. So for example, in my team, right, we're using today for the first version is we are cloud agnostic, but we chose the alpha version to be on GCP, and we're using Golang as the backend language, right? But if, for example, you are someone who actually built, event-driven architectures, and you've been doing, data processing, streaming, and you are used to do it with, let's say, Flink and Java over AWS, apply right away. Like I'm looking for people again with expertise in certain fields, but the tech itself, like we're very confident these people are smart people and they can learn new things.
I completely agree. I think from a recruitment standpoint, obviously, evidently, I've got an opinion on this, but I think a lot of the companies, especially B2C at large scale audiences, optimize for scalability, availability, or reliability. Some of the things that we've spoken about, as opposed to particular languages, you open up a pool and a mindset to so many more people than when you focus in a specific area. If anyone's listening, please do that. I think it's the right approach. Seems like you are as well, or you guys, which I implore. I think it's the right thing to do.
Cheers. And I guess we don't have the choice either, right? I do believe that's the right choice, but I do believe as well, like the market changed. So today it's, you know the market, right? You cannot really afford kind of like being old school and it's like, I want folks to do exactly like this. No, it doesn't work like that anymore.
Yeah, Robert would impress you, actually, for everyone listening. He's actually sourcing people himself. He's on LinkedIn sourcing people. So if he reaches out to you before you reach out to him, which I hope is the case, do reach out to him. Obviously, you've heard a good chunk of 45, 50 minutes of us talking about some of their platform challenges. You've heard some very interesting figures around scale. Do reach out to the guys and girls. Obviously, if you're European based and US based, technology agnostic, but Robert might reach out to you as well.
Yeah. And again, I think one last point is, even if you're not looking for a job and you just want to connect and kind of like share best practices and whatever, right? Like, we're all into this, right? It's not one company versus the other. It's as the developer community is the same thing with like the community of, people hiring and whatnot. So feel free to even just drop and say, yeah, I feel your pain, with hiring. And, I'm more than happy to discuss about those things. But again, I think it's a great moment to join Algolia. It's not just because I work there, but it's the moment, the sweet spot between like really, really accelerating and not being a small startup anymore, cannot afford to go fast. So yes, join us.
Love it. I agree. Robert, I want to say big thanks. Today's been massively insightful on Algolia, some Amazon mindset, what you're doing, what you're building, and just really coherent and clear. So big thanks from me, Will, engineers, everyone. Come and like, share, subscribe, get in touch with Robert, talk to him about what you're doing, and big peace and love to everyone.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you a lot for having me, and cheers, everyone. Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for watching this episode. Massively appreciate you listening and checking in with us. If you want to find out more about us and what we're doing, please check us out on social media. What we're trying to do at Enginears is build a community to drive knowledge sharing and experiences. On Twitter, we can be found at Enginears.io. It's no_. We've also got a website, which is enginears.io. These links will all be posted in the description. Any feedback and comments are massively appreciated. We're always looking to improve on where we can. Thanks, guys.